You are listening to Mining Stock Education, where you'll learn from the top leaders in the natural resource sector and uncover quality mining investment opportunities.
I've never seen the world more messed up than it is right now. And for me to continue on investing the way I think a rational person would, I just don't think a rational person in this environment would be putting more money to work. They'd sort of be saying, well, listen, maybe I'll just sit tight here for a while and just see how things develop.
I'm Bill Powers. It's Mining Stock Education. Thanks for tuning in again today. And with the tumultuous times we're seeing in the world, record inflation, potentially World War III, it's looking like it's shaping up to, and all the different shifts, Bretton Woods 3, some are talking about that's occurring in the world. I was thinking who to reach out to speak to on these things and even advise me personally on what I should do with all these US dollars that I have in my bank. So I reached out to Warren Irwin of Rossau Asset Management. He's the Chief Investment Officer as well as founder. Warren, welcome back onto the show. Now, you're overcoming COVID and you still agreed to do this interview. So I first have to commend you for that. And thanks for coming back on the show.
Well, thanks, Bill. Yeah, I definitely hope you're exactly right that I'm overcoming it. And it doesn't get much worse than it is. But that's the reason why I have a more masculine voice today. So
your voice is a little deeper than mine.
Yeah.
But could you speak to particularly those of us in the States or throughout the world that are holding US dollars? I have physical gold and silver. I have my mining stocks. I have some real estate and some other investments. But then I've been asking myself, particularly in the last 30 days, what do I do with all these US dollars I have in my bank account? What advice might you give someone like me?
Well, the good part of it is this has happened historically before. And if you take a look at it, I've got a couple of books here on my bookshelf, both the Weimar Republic, Germany pre-rise of Hitler sort of thing, where they had hyperinflation. That's not a dissimilar situation here that we could end up in should things get a little bit out of hand. But it shows basically how the people that won in that situation were basically people who owned hard assets and had money in currencies that were much better than the mark at the time. So, in today's world, what would that be? It would be, the Swiss Franc and others like that, just super hard currencies. The thing about gold is, there's a lot of people, I've listened my entire career about people talking about gold's going to $1 billion an ounce and we're going to make a fortune on gold. And well, one thing gold has proven to me in my career and what I've seen realistically is gold is a store of value, not necessarily a way to make a ton of money. So when you have major money in whatever way you do it, whether it be trading mining stocks or whatever, to own gold or gold bullion, it's a way to protect that money. As far as expecting any massive runs on it, I'm not sure you want to factor that into your expectations. There's enough people calling for crazy prices on gold. I'm not one of those people. I'm saying gold is a great way to protect your wealth. So obviously I have some gold, and my recollection is I paid $500 an ounce for it. Now it's around $2,000. So it's quadrupled in value during the whole period I've held it. So it definitely has protected the value of my purchasing power. And, it truly is incredible how, you could dig up a bag of coins that were buried, 1,000+ years ago by some Viking somewhere. And you yank it out today, it's still worth a lot of money. And that's where I'm not totally convinced that in 1,000 years from now, somebody's going to turn on a laptop and your Bitcoin is going to have value. There's something to be said about having something that you could, with a store of value, that you could throw in your knapsack and start crossing borders with. And so I'm still quite edgy on this whole Bitcoin thing and relying on global networks, especially when you're looking at where we are today with the possibility of World War III, where you can imagine when nuclear weapons start going off, if they do, the electromagnetic pulse doesn't doesn't work too well on, doesn't help electronics. So a lot of electronics around the world will get blown up if indeed we go live with nuclear. So I think the thing to have is gold. And now you talk about silver. I remember going to the Bank of Nova Scotia's vault in Toronto. A friend of mine was kind enough to organize a tour for me. So I walk into this big vault, I think it's the biggest in Toronto. And I'm looking around, I'm looking at these big skids and these massive bars. And I'm thinking, wow, look at all this gold. And then I go up there and I said, that's not gold, that's tarnished silver. I said, well, that's one of the big beefs of silver is it tarnishes, right? It's not, nobody talks about it, but it's awful. Okay, well, where's all the gold? Where's all this gold I hear about? And they go, oh, it's over in that cabinet. So we open this little cabinet. Oh, there's all the gold. So that struck me very, very importantly in that the store of value of gold is very, very compact compared to silver, right? And you can have a little wafer this big, right? It'll be a kilogram of gold, right? It'll be worth, I think around 80,000 Canadian dollars right now, I think. So the gold I would prefer gold over silver just because you throw it in the ground, it doesn't tarnish. You dig it up, you can throw it in your knapsack, take it on a plane, go wherever you want to go, like do whatever you want to do, go wherever you need to do. And it always has value and it's small. Whereas if you're hauling around this massive bar of silver, that's tricky. So I'm a big fan of gold and gold coins, but I would think that if you plan on staying in one place, having silver coins wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but I'm not as much of a fan of silver. I think gold's the place to be. And so put your money in hard currencies, in some gold, in real assets. There's stories when you read any book about the Weimar Republic about businessmen going into the bank and borrowing large sums of money to buy a company, paying the poor, typical, blue collar German saver, virtually no interest rate. Yet, in about several months' time, they're able to repay that loan with a day's earnings from the company. So the savers who blindly just kept their money in the banks got completely destroyed, and the borrowers who were able to get access to capital to buy real assets were the ones that made out like bandits in that environment. And where we are here today, look how low interest rates are and look how high inflation is. And people are saying, well, inflation's transitory. And well, it's transitory. Yeah, right. We'll have to see to what extent the governments around the world have a desire to, pull a Volcker and crank up interest rates to stop the inflation. Because right now, which is just crazy, as you're probably aware too, is try building a house, try getting lumber, try getting steel. I got a quote on some steel yesterday. I couldn't believe the price of steel. You say, Warren, yeah, it's going to, the guy works for me, actually, a hired man I got here on the ranch. And he goes, well, it's going to cost about $5,000 to build this little steel structure. I'm going, $5,000? Are you kidding me? Price of steel, price of lumber, price of everything. I also, I've heard stories of various places getting, 20, 30% price increases across the board with whether it be PVC piping or any construction materials. So things are out of hand. There's one way to stop it, which is higher interest rates. And we'll see if the U.S. government gets on it quick enough.
So with transitioning U.S. dollars into Swiss francs, what would be some of the key risks associated with doing that? For example, if the war pours over into Europe, would that be something that someone in Swiss francs should worry about?
Yeah, well, you always have to worry about being in any bank. Switzerland, my recollection, is neutral. But once things start flying and armies start moving and nukes start hitting, when a nuclear weapon does go off, it gives an electromagnetic pulse, which just obliterates and fries out a lot of electronics, right? So that's probably the biggest risk to our electronic system and, to people's computers and the internets and things like that. So when you are in a bank, that is indeed a risk you take. That they'll have backup sites. Sure. Where are the backup sites? I don't know. That is a risk. That is for sure. And that there always is a risk when you have it at a bank. There's also a risk if you keep your money in your mattress, or you keep your gold in a safe at your house, or even keep your gold at a bank in a safety deposit box. There's always a risk. So my view just generally on that is we want to all be like squirrels, which is have a few nuts here, a few nuts there. I watched the squirrels running around here in the fall, running around with their face, their mouths full of nuts, hiding a little bit of nuts here, a few nuts there, and they're pretty sharp. They know that if sometimes somebody will steal all their nuts over there, but at least they'll have a few more elsewhere. So I think it's important. The general rule of thumb I look at is when you're trying to make money, you don't want to be diversified. You want to be focused, right? But when you're trying to maintain your wealth, you want to be diversified. So you want to have a bit of money, a little bit everywhere, a little bit of gold, a little bit of Swiss francs, a little bit, different things. And
if you were given a binary choice, Warren, I know you're not a fan of Bitcoin, but would you prefer Bitcoin over being forced by your own government into a digitized Canadian dollar, or a digitized, in my case, US dollar?
Wow, that's an interesting question.
Because I think that's the trend that we're seeing, especially, and we're seeing governments seize bank accounts, even in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah. No, I saw some bank accounts. It's not that many years ago. There was a bunch of seizure of bank accounts in Cyprus, I remember. Yeah, I'm just generally not a huge fan of a lot of this digital stuff, and especially if it's government controlled. I guess the trick is really whether or not. Well, I guess the trick is whether or not it's readily acceptable by various merchants. That's really the key. And because right now, obviously, it's difficult to buy groceries with Bitcoin. I'm sure some smart person is going to, yell at me saying, "Oh, everybody knows you can take your Bitcoin and you go to a little kiosk and you get the cash and then you go buy your groceries." Okay, fine. But so, and I know you can't go into a grocery store with a bar of gold and buy groceries either. So, that's a very good question. I'm not a super big fan of the cryptos because you see, in China is not supportive of them, and with government's ability to just wave their wand and outlaw Bitcoin or put heavy restrictions on it, especially if it's going to start competing with their own digital currency, is quite great. So I think you run a risk there. So I guess answering my own question, I would rather have a government-backed digital currency rather than a crypto, because I think the governments will start clamping down on it if they find it's competing with their own currency, because governments really like to control their money supply and the currency within their country. So I think I'd stick with the government one, but I might be wrong.
The trajectory I see, which it seems to be happening fast in real time, is the de-dollarization of the world, the US dollar, where the US dollar is not going to be the world reserve currency the way it has been. So with that being the case, would you rather be in Canadian dollars or US dollars right now?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I am in Canadian dollars. I don't have a lot of US dollars. The Canadian dollars, when people ask me about the Canadian dollar, they say, "Warren, where's the Canadian dollar going?" I said, "Well, you tell me where the price of oil is going, I'll tell you where the Canadian dollar is going." We're pretty much a petrocurrency, and a lot of people don't know that. That's a little inside scoop here for everybody. Do your work and look at the correlation between the price of oil and the Canadian dollar, and you'll find that the price of oil has a significant part of what happens with the Canadian dollar. So. In that world where, and if you're giving me a binary decision again,
sorry, with all the binary decisions,
I'd rather own something real. Okay, so I would rather own the Canadian dollar over the US dollar, just because a couple of reasons. We are resource based, we're heavily oil based, and in hyperinflation, in that type of environment, we also produce a lot of copper, metallurgical coal, a lot of base metals, and we produce gold. It's probably not the worst place to be in an inflationary world.
Yeah, that makes sense. How has the whole war between NATO, Ukraine, Russia, how has that affect where you're willing to go in your resource portfolio and in your duties as a resource fund manager?
Yeah, what I'm doing right now is for me to get involved in a new name, it would have to be such an extraordinary situation. I cannot imagine people investing in this market right now, investing new money in new names. And so I'm not sure whether people aren't following what's going on in Ukraine, whether they just think it's a regional issue. I'm not a military historian, but I have been in the military. I was in the Canadian Reserves when I was younger, and so I have been in the Army. I know how the Army thinks, and I know how the military thinks. I have studied military history somewhat. And as we all know, World War I started on a very, not saying it's trivial to have a Archduke Ferdinand assassinated, but it started with an assassination. And prior to coming into this war, I was telling anybody who would listen over the last number of years, I said, I just feel the level of uneasiness in this world. It reminds me of the rise of, Franco and Hitler and all these despots prior to World War II. And I said, the world just feels uneasy. The world feels like I see, our prime minister is trying to divide our country into by every which way he can, whether it be divide us by race, divide us by political beliefs, divide us by region of the country, the West against the East. I'm seeing that division by politicians around the world, and that leads to unsettling consequences. So obviously, you had some division when Trump was your president. There was probably more division as an exterior observer of the U.S. I saw probably more division in your country than I've seen in my lifetime. But so this unsettling divisions and uncertainty was clear before this whole Ukrainian situation happened. So. And here we are. And right now, there are a lot of ways this thing can go. And who's to know? Like, would it be good if the Ukrainians won? Would it be good? Well, then you back Putin into a corner? He does something desperate. You don't know what his off ramp is, and you don't know what the true. And you and I have no idea what the true intention is of the U.S. government. Are the people in power determined to remove Putin? And do they see this as the opportunity to do that? Will they remove it, and who will replace him? And how will that happen? Do they want to destroy Russia? Because it's really a West against Russia right now, with Ukraine just being the proxy war, right? So it is really, to some people I know, believe World War III has already started. The question is, how hot will it get? And there are a number of Western countries that would love to see Russia destroyed, I think. And would like definitely everybody in the world, except for Putin, wants Putin removed, except for apparently a lot of Russians seem to love the guy. But we're sort of things are heating up here, and let's see how far it goes. And we don't know how far it will go. And we're dealing with the guy who by some accounts has cancer, and it's about his legacy and how he'll be seen in the history books going forward. So it's always dangerous when that is the case. Whereas the old Putin was more concerned about stealing as much as he could from the Russian people and having as much money as he could and building his big $1 billion home and that sort of thing, and having his yachts. But I think now it's more of his ego and his building his legacy, and having his cancer doctor following him around as much as he has been. He gives an indication that he may not be long for this world. So he doesn't have a lot to lose if he pushes the button.
So with Russia's leverage when it comes to resources over Europe in particular, they have leverage with palladium, nickel, natural gas, oil. Doesn't that leverage make those commodities, if they're in safer jurisdictions, run by good management teams, shouldn't those investment possibilities become more attractive though? Because there's the argument that, yes, there's so much uncertainty. We don't know big shifts are happening economically. With war, there's uncertainty, but there's also a lot of opportunities in the commodities at the same time because the world needs these things.
Yeah, well, all else being equal, with no war in Ukraine, if there was no war in Ukraine right now, I'd be talking to you about it's a great time to be in commodities. We need more copper. We need more nickel. We need more metallurgical coal. We need more iron ore. We need pretty much everything. And of course, oil. I've been pounding the table in oil for the last couple of years, saying, I know we have not been spending as a race enough money looking for oil, given we have an 8% decline rate each year, and oil is bad. Nobody's financing any of my junior oil companies. Nobody's looking for oil. It's going to come around and bite us, and it's biting us. It's biting us now. Now, on the commodity front, what'll be interesting will be how China deals with things, because there's no use the Europeans cutting off, let's say, oil purchases from Russia. If China just says, okay, well, you guys could buy it from Saudi Arabia, and we'll stop buying from Saudi Arabia, we'll buy from Russia instead. So that is the risk to the sanctions against Russia. There was some talk on the news the other night I was watching where Putin's revenues actually are up like a third. And he was looking at almost $1/3 $1 trillion in oil revenues each year now. And when you compare that to the piddly amount, the Western allies are helping out the Ukrainians with, he is making so much money in this higher oil environment. I guess the only thing that could stop him from things would be he probably just can't buy tanks fast enough or build tanks fast enough. And apparently a significant amount of the arms manufacturing capability was in Ukraine. So I'm not sure how much he has in Russia. I'm not sure whether every single arms factory in Russia is running full tilt with all this money Putin is making from the higher price of oil. But there's lots of money going into his coffers. And so it's not as if we're harming him that much with all these, I don't think we harm him too much by not having Louis Vuitton in Moscow. Sorry, Louis Vuitton, but how we harm him is stop buying his oil. And if we stop buying it, and the Chinese just continue to buy it instead, it's not going to help us rein in this tyrant,
So if you are maybe not as eager to initiate a new position in the resource sector, are you holding the positions that you already established, or can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, well, I've got three significant positions, and they're all in discoveries which were made probably 5-6 years ago, and they've gradually been drilled out, and they're ready for sale now. And fortunately, we have not really seen a strong M&A cycle yet for some of these items. For instance, I own part of the Cascabel discovery, the big copper discovery in Ecuador, and I own that through Cornerstone. And I own NextGen, which is a big uranium discovery in northern Canada. And I also own a big metallurgical coal deposit in northeastern British Columbia in Canada. So these are all sought after assets. And what we need now is just to see some of the majors who have been, quietly making absolutely tons of money. Eventually, they're going to have so much cash in their books, they're going to say, well, we could either give it back to shareholders or we could reinvest in some new projects. So I'm hoping that will happen. If I'm able to sell some of these, I imagine some of them will get bought. Would I reinvest that money? Probably not. I think I like to sit tight for sure, and wait for a better time to get into the market. But then there's some people are of the view, well, if we have nuclear war, it won't matter anyway. So why don't we just balls to the wall, invest in everything we can, and assuming we don't have it, because if we do have it, we'll all be in a pretty rough shape. So that's another approach people are taking. So, but my approach, I think, is I'd like to get some of my names sold. The commodity prices are doing very well. Copper's doing great. Uranium, I just noticed, hit $62 here this morning. Met coal it's come off a little bit recently, but it was up like $20 overnight in Australia. So everything's doing pretty well, and the potential buyers know there's going to be shortages in the future, and they're making tons of cash. So for them to cut a check for $1 billion here, a few billion there, to pick up some of these assets, is probably not the worst thing in the world for them, because we will need these commodities going forward if the world is not completely obliterated with nuclear war. So,
carbon royalty, that's another thing we're seeing more of. Are you? I guess I might be asking the same question, but have you invested in any of these type of deals?
Yeah, I gave some money to a friend of mine who, not a huge amount of money, a small amount of money into a carbon deal. So we'll see what he ends up doing with it. He's partnered up with some very, very smart people who really know the carbon credit market. And so we'll see what happens. And I think the market will develop over time, but it's just really just a small toe in the water to see what happens. Would I bet the whole wad on something like that? No, but I'm just doing it just to get familiar with the market, see how it's going, watch it develop a little bit, get involved with some good people, and see if there's money to be made there. So we'll see.
And last question, I assume if you're not investing in Bitcoin, probably not investing in the metaverse or NFTs, right?
Well, I just bought this really nice property right next to Snoop Dogg on the metaverse. And I went shopping and bought some really amazing metaverse clothes. They fit better in the metaverse than they do in my real body. I look really good. Trust me on this one, Bill. Yeah. So, I don't know. Am I the only one who thinks that's the metaverse is just one of the most completely ridiculous and nonsensical things in the world? I'm just not. Maybe I'm totally missing out on the metaverse, but I think metaverse, NFTs, I'm not there. But on things that are collectible, I'm not a fan of modern art. I'm not. I don't see why people would pay $30 million for a white canvas where a famous artist throws some paint against it and says, "Oh, $30 million." And so I'm not in that market. I don't collect hockey cards or baseball cards, but some people love it. And with all this stuff, it all comes down to if the value is really, will other people pay money for it? And other people pay money for Wayne Gretzky rookie hockey cards, or Babe Ruth hockey cards, or modern art by one of a host of modern artists. So just because I don't think it has any value doesn't mean it's not totally collectible. And some people may love their NFTs and their new threads they have in the metaverse, or some of the real estate investments they're making in the metaverse. So knock yourself out, kids. It's definitely a new world. And I'm just especially blown away by the amount of money people have made with Bitcoin.
And made it quickly too. And that's the expectation, right? I know a guy that made 7 figures in 1 week on some AMC and GME calls last year. Yeah. So no, those are that's interesting. And I've been through a few greed cycles myself. I remember the one that I was most active in was a big greed cycle in the resource sector in the mid 90s. And then it was kind of fun to watch the greed cycle with the NASDAQ with the turn of the internet in 1999 and 2000. That was fascinating too. And sadly, both those came to an end. So we'll see how this whole Bitcoin thing comes to an end. We'll see how the NFTs come to, what happens with the NFTs, the metaverse, all this stuff, and we'll see. But meanwhile, the bulk of my assets are in real things, which are like real estate, copper, met coal, uranium, gold, like just real things. I'm boring. I'm sorry. And you have a ranch too, right? For those that don't know, you have a pretty impressive ranch.
Yeah, no, I have a ranch and there's cows on it and stuff. And the air here is fresh, and I'm away from any immediate blast zones, from any nuclear strikes. I might have some fallout depending on where the winds are blowing. But in the last few weeks, I've done tons of reading on fallout shelters. And I'm pretty sure I'm not sure if you guys know some of the math, but I think it's like 80% of the radiation from fallout, which is just the radioactive dust that is a result of a nuclear blast. When it gets in the upper atmosphere, you don't really know where the winds are blowing, but it'll settle back down to Earth. So if it settles on your house, you want to go to your basement so you're far enough away from it. But the radiation, my recollection from what I've read is about 80% of it is gone in 24 hours. So if you could shelter yourself for the first 24 hours from that, that's a good thing. And then over a period of a couple of weeks, that's why people build fallout shelters. In a couple of weeks, it's down to like 1% of the radiation.
And don't you do like 2 or 3 weeks of iodine pills too?
Yeah, I've got iodine pills. I remember
this is our most depressing interview, by the way, Warren.
Oh, I'm sorry, but
we're talking about nuclear war.
But I remember I had some experience with pandemics more before COVID hit, because I was operating. I was the largest shareholder in an oil company operating in Liberia, and we were partners with Exxon. And the whole Ebola thing just blew up. So I was all on top of this Ebola thing, and Exxon shut down our operation. They shut down their office. They shut down the yard there. They had to store pipe, and so I immediately went out and got my assistant to load up on N100 masks, which are 99.9, and then I got goggles, and like if you saw what happens with people with Ebola, it's terrible. I was going, man, if this Ebola ever comes to North America, I don't want anything to do with it. So I loaded up with all these N100s and these full hazmat suits and the boot covers and the goggles and the gloves, and my girlfriend thought I was crazy, and she was laughing at me. Well, when the COVID started and there were no masks in North America, I had boxes and boxes of these N100 masks, which are the highest level mask, or one of the highest level masks there are. So we were wearing these N100s to the grocery store, and people were thinking we're crazy. But and they're just wondering, where'd you get those? We'd like to get some. And so it's all about owning some things before other people realize they need to own them. So those N100 masks definitely served us very, very well until the N95s came out, and the N95s are way easier to breathe through than the N100s. But anyways, that's sort of my little trivia story. But I'll tell you, iodine tablets will be the same thing, right? Do you own any?
I do, but they're out of date. I just asked my wife about it, actually.
Okay. Yeah. So, like try to find iodine tablets after a few nukes start going off in Europe. Like, forget it. Yeah. Now, trust me, maybe what we should do, don't invest in the US dollar, invest in iodine tablets. Okay. Because, or
iodine company, or avoid all equities.
Yeah, I remember Lucas Lundin used to have an iodine company in South America somewhere. I don't know what happened to that one, but I should definitely check the expiry date on my iodine tablets. And one of those things that you have and you hope you never use. And I'd hoped I never would have used my N100s, but I did. And so what do you do? But this world is a bit of a messed up place. I'm hoping, like everybody, that things will settle down in the Ukraine, and there's definitely a serious problem there, and there's a lot of bad stuff going on the ground in Ukraine, and let's hope that ends soon in a peaceful settlement. But it's not you can never know how that's going to end up. And Bill, perhaps the reason we're having a depressing conversation is because I've been around 57 years, right? And by far, this is the most messed up I have ever seen in this world, whether it be everything from construction to shipping costs to trying to buy a car to with global climate change. And then you get this, we're on the verge of World War III with Russia. Like we have a lot of really weird stuff going on right now all at once. Oh yeah, COVID, don't forget COVID, right? Like, so you add it all together, Bill, we got a lot of weird stuff going on. And for somebody to sit back and say, oh yeah, nothing's changed, let's invest in some junior gold stocks. Well, okay. It's like, I'm not there yet. I haven't smoked enough dope to be that chill to do that. I'm sort of still of the view, I've never seen the world more messed up than it is right now. And for me to continue on and investing the way I think a rational person would, I just don't think a rational person in this environment would be putting more money to work. They'd sort of be saying, well, listen, maybe I'll just sit tight here for a while and just see how things develop. And let's keep our fingers crossed.
You're in the wealth preservation stage too, though, right? So a lot of my listeners are going to be in the wealth accumulation phase. So we're looking for opportunities. So I'm playing both, Warren. I'm trying to accumulate as well as preserve what I've obtained thus far.
Yeah, well, the one thing I've learned in the last number of years here is, let's take a look at, one name I've been preaching everybody about it for last 3 or 4 years has been NextGen, right? NextGen's been an interesting one. And, what's interesting about NextGen is in that meltdown we had in 2020 because of COVID, it hit 80 cents. Today it's $7. So, and then you look at, Tech, which is, a blue chip Canadian resource company. And it was, how many years ago? It was $4 and now it's $40, $50. And so there are these times where you just need to really just take your cash to make money. Sometimes you need to just take your cash, just sit back and wait for those really, really good opportunities where you have to pinch yourself and say, what am I missing here? Why is Tech $4? Is it going to go bankrupt? Is it not going to bankrupt? And I remember I was short Tech at around $13 and I covered around $4, but I was not smart enough to and now trust me, Bill, now I ask the question, if I've just covered the short, should I go long? Because the real money was made long. And I remember the stock got into the threes. This is the previous, not this past meltdown in Tech, it was the previous one. It got into the threes, and then before you know it, it's $40. You can make a 10-bagger on a highly liquid blue chip resource company like Tech, and then you take a look at NextGen, blue chip junior uranium, the best uranium deposit in the world, and in early 2020, you could have bought it for 80 cents a share, and it's now $7. And so sometimes, it makes sense to sit on a little bit of cash so that you have cash for opportunities like that, because the amount of money you can make, if you have a bit of cash, is phenomenal. And unfortunately, in 2020, I did not have a lot of cash extra to load up on NextGen. Fortunately, I was able to ride it through. I didn't have to sell any, but I certainly wish I had another $100 million to throw in the NextGen at 80 cents, because could have made almost $1 billion in that trade. But there's so the key here, let's see what kind of opportunities unfold. I don't think it would be an unwise thing for investors to be sitting on a bit of cash here, waiting for a few things to shake out and just see what happens here.
Excellent. Well, really appreciate your time, Warren. Thank you for sharing your insights and analysis. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Bill. Always great chatting with you. Cheers.
Cheers.